is the third of our events in the Cockney Conversations Month. As I say, the event is very designed to be informative, informal, and insightful. My name's Andy Green. I'm from Grow Social Capital, a social enterprise that looks to build community identity and as a resource for creating better social justice and making a difference in the world. Saif, do you want to just say a few words about yourself, mate?
Yeah, my name's Saif Osmani. I'm living in East London, in Stratford at the moment, although mainly in Upton Park, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Bengali East End Heritage Society, which is a bit of a mouthful of name, but it's part of a trajectory of the East End Preservation Society and the Jewish East End Celebration Society, and so we thought, why not? Let's try our own societies, and so really excited about joining with Andy. On Growth Social Capital because it's an area which is very close to our heart and it's fast disappearing in front of us. The disappearing East End is what we're interested in.
Well, East End and the Cockney identity beyond. So our panel today, we shortly introduce you to Tom Armstrong, Mark Denton and Kerry Sheehan. I understand Kerry's got some technical problems getting in, but we'll speak to her shortly.
Kerry's coming in at the moment, yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, then, so Kerry, just welcome Kerry in the room. And as I say, sorry we've had some technical problems, including my camera. Lovely to see you, Kerry. So we've got a panel here today, but before we get the panel discussion underway, I just want to reference a document we've produced as part of Cockney Cultures. So Cockney Conversations Month, we're exploring Cockney identity and really looking at how we can make Cockney identity more purposeful and fit for purpose in 2022. And one of the issues we face is people say that, we've heard a sociolinguist report that Cockney is dying on the streets of London. And as I say, concerned that, is there life in Cockney? Well, if you go online, there's lots of data that signifies that Cockney is alive and well, albeit in this interesting one using Google Ngram, which is a tool that measures the use of Cockney as a phrase or term in printed text. And for some reason, which I'd love to get to the bottom of, 1820 was the peak for Cockney in terms of that. But you can see there the upward graph over the latter part of the 20th century, still a vibrant entity, still something that's got interest and vibrancy in it. Interesting, moving on, looking at, we're very keen to position not just about Cockney, but also all regional UK accents. And you can see there the graph for Scouse, and again, very positive, although a decline. And this is mirrored across other regional accents, Geordie, Ouija, Brum. So there's a concern that, if you care about regional identity, care that we don't want to become bland, there's an issue I think we all need to sort of sit up and take notice about. I want to hit you now with one other amazing fact. This is the Mayor of London's Culture for All Londoners strategy. So it's the Mayor's culture strategy. Now, I'm not making any political points here, we're politically independent. Can anyone in the room put in the chat how many times the word Cockney was used in the Mayor of London's culture strategy report? Anyone in the chat want to have a guess how many times the word Cockney was used in that report? Any suggestions? Well, I'll give you an answer: 0. And I think one of the things that's been interesting in our work in these last couple of weeks is that we've uncovered what we believe to be a sort of tacit emergence that for some people the word Cockney is not only associated with, like, say, maybe London working class culture perhaps, but for some it's actually also maybe that we've uncovered that for some Cockney is also seen as maybe working class and racist. And we're very keen to stress that we're keen to emphasise an identity of Cockney that's inclusive, based on positive values of being resilient, defiant, resourceful, and also an irreverent and stoic wit. So, as I say, concern that our campaign is not just about celebrating our pride in our identity, but also defending it and ensuring that there's not a misunderstanding that, as I say, Cockney's been labelled in this way. So we've got a series of events, and as I say, covering a range of topics. And so do join us on next next Thursday and the Thursday after, and our final event on Monday the 4th. The reason we've chosen our dates, 3rd of the 3rd to the 4th of the 4th. So we've got our panel today. So Saif, do you want to sort of kick off the chat with our panel, and I'll go through the different slides?
Yeah. So the first question, if I go with Kerry, I think we'll start with Kerry. What's your
Please do,
story?
mate, because the slide's on.
What's your story of London? And yeah, go for it.
What's my story of London? Good afternoon, everyone. So my story of London is born to an Irish father who came over from grandparents. My dad was one of 7, born in the sound of the London Bow Bells. You're not going to go anywhere. You're not going to do anything. You Cockney scoundrels type thing. You know, still got a family that live around in Poplar, Bow. Myself, I worked down at Wapping and so forth. And just, you know, I'm sure we'll get onto this as we move forwards, but, you know, I myself have faced discrimination, not only for the Irish Cockney background in a sense, but also because we're now accused of having an estuary English accent, and perceptions, misperceptions and bias and so forth, unfortunately, still alive and kicking today. So a little bit about me, my day job.
Ken, I was going to say we've got our exhibition of the story of Cockney in 50 exhibits. I'm just wondering if maybe you kindly shared some your suggestions. So the idea is, how can we tell the story in 50? And we've invited our panelists to suggest. So Kerry, I mean, like number one here, there's one very famous. Why did you choose Chris Street Market?
Chris Street Market, around the corner to where a lot of my family used to live. It's still got the Arch of the Gates still there in existence today. And no matter what the change in, you know, demographics across the years, it's still managed to survive to today. Although I know there's still some threats hanging over. It's just a focal point for people to come talk together, real sense of community. And even though the communities are shifting today, it still remains a focal point for those communities in that area of the East End.
You've also got a Rosie Lee. What's that? What's the significance there?
Can't give me enough. Always time for a cup of tea. So always time for Rosie Lee tea. Yeah. It is what it says there.
Great stuff. And then this is interesting. What made about this pub here?
So I myself used to work down at Wapping News International. Ended up having probably one too many pints or one too many wines a good few years ago. The pub is on the highway. It's not there anymore, but the stone on there dates back quite a few hundred years. And maybe that's where some of the misconceptions, preconceived ideas come from, you know, from people that might, you know, still speak with a Cockney twang in a sense. Lots of fights and so forth there. It's in quite a lot of the history books as well. And despite the fact the pub's now closed down because they don't have the footfall, because News International was shut down now, it's under development.
I think because you moved on.
Yeah, we've all moved on, but they've agreed to keep that plaque there as a testament. And I believe it dates back to somebody got put in prison. The locals didn't like what that person had done. The prison officers took the body out of the prison. This is sort of folklore in a sense, and the locals did what they needed to do, but they've put that plaque there, and it's, despite what that building is throughout the years, it's always stayed there, and they've got a guarantee that hopefully it will stay there for many years.
Oh, that's great. You mentioned News International.
Yeah, obviously East End's got a turbulent history, but obviously News International down at the old Wapping plant adds to that turbulent history, the protests and so forth. But actually, you know, back in the heyday, possibly not so much now, a lot of people that came from those, you know, East End communities actually worked at News International. You know, I myself was a journalist for many years, but people worked in the print plants, people worked in the supply chain. So again, it was a real community hub for the locals and a real good way of providing jobs as well to many people.
What have you got here? He says he astonished.
So objects, obviously the World Cup there. You know, West Ham. I'd like to say the greatest football team in the world, but we will get there. The greatest
I hasten to interject.
The greatest football team in the east of London, without a doubt. Great history. West Ham's been known as the Cockney Boys for many, many years throughout its history, and we can't forget the West Ham boys that supported, you know, the World Cup in 1966. Haven't won it since.
Well, when you eat a dog. And okay, thanks for sharing that. So if you want to lead,
next, same question to the next people. What, Tom Armstrong? What's your story of London?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am from North East London, right on the border of where sort of the inner city meets Essex. So I guess my experience in London was different versions. You had the sort of young, very multicultural street culture of UK garage and council estates, which is kind of where me and my mates were. And then if you went 10 minutes the other way, you had the sort of a bit more of the old Cockney knees up people who have moved out to the suburbs and kind of brought that culture with them, in places like Loughton and Epping and Chigwell. So it was a good place to grow up, to be honest, because you had loads of characters about, and it was a good vantage point to sort of see the evolution of Cockney, kind of young London and old East London. And like Waltham Forest really was my sort of stomping ground, from Walthamstow to Leytonstone to Leyton. And it's funny because even though it's East London, it's not really the East End, and we never really saw ourselves as East Enders in that way, which is like one of those kind of little nuances, Cockney nuance that's like it's East London, but it's not really the East End. You know?
Yeah.
Were there other terms that you'd use to describe yourself?
No, but honestly, we just never really thought about it. It was just I never even realised until I worked in the media. I never even realised I had an accent. You know, it was just that's what just everybody sounded like. But my family, I've got family from all over London, from Tottenham to Walworth Road, Elephant in the south. So yeah, and that goes back hundreds of years.
So some of your objects there, Tom.
Yeah, so if there was one kind of symbol of the London that I grew up in, it would be the big Art Deco sign for Walthamstow Dog Track, which I think is one of the most recognisable landmarks of London. Although the dogs closed in, I think, 2008, going to the dogs was a big thing when I was young, and it kind of it sort of declined as the area became unfashionable and unpopular. A lot of the kind of the old school Londoners moved out of Walthamstow, so there was less people going. But the main reason that I picked this is because underneath Walthamstow Dogs there was a club called Charlie Chan's. It's a nightclub, and it was every single Friday is where we would go. I think it was quite a glamorous place in the 90s. A lot of footballers used to go there, but to be honest, by the time we were going there, it was quite ghetto. And it was, but it was a brilliant. It was our first clubbing experience. Everybody from all over Northeast and out to Essex would go. It was kind of UK garage, which is itself is a very London thing. So that was lots of very fond memories every time I see that Walthamstow Stadium sign.
And the footwear, mate.
Yeah, so the Reebok workout. I mean, the Reebok Classic, I think, gets the kind of credit as being the sort of the old school London trainer. But when I was coming up, the Reebok workout was definitely the one. It was a little bit more aspirational and a bit more glam than the Reebok Classic. And I think if you spoke to any of my mates from all over the UK, all of them say Reebok is a Cockney thing, especially at football. You know, from all over London, but like, you spot a group of Cockneys because they've all got Reeboks on. So that's a big thing.
Can I suggest that old school would be plimsolls like me? But anyway, there you go. But great stuff there. Thanks for sharing, mate. Saif.
So, same question to Mark Denton. What's your story of London?
Well, story of London. I've got the story of my experience of London. 65 years. I've always lived in London all my life. I feel privileged to be invited onto this panel because I'm a bit of a foreigner insofar as I'm from south of the river.
Oh, God forbid.
So maybe I should have owned up to that.
You got your passport?
I was born in Greenwich. My dad came from Cholton and my mum came from Deptford. And so I'd like to think that I've still retained my London accent a bit, or me, for want of a better term, traditional London accent. But I've been in advertising for 45 years. So when I go back home and see...
Sorry, Mark, I think you've frozen there, mate. We just froze you. You're saying when you're going back home, you what, mate?
When I go back home, am I still frozen?
No, you're right, mate. Yeah.
Okay. I'm more entertaining when I'm frozen, but I'll go on.
You should go basking at Covent Garden, mate.
When I go back home to see my dad, I'm the posh one. It doesn't take me long to slip back into it, but this is my acquired media accent over the last 45 years. I was lucky insofar as I was born in Greenwich. It's funny how you're proud of where you're born, but you've got no control over that. It just happened to be luck. I live north of the river now, but my old man had a couple of scrap yards. He had a scrap yard in Peckham, and he had a scrap yard in Camberwell. And he only just recently, because he never used to talk to me much when I was young. He used to keep himself to himself a bit. So he's only now we're both getting on a bit that he's opening up. He also had a couple of scrap yards north of the river, but I don't know exactly where they were. So I was working, before I got into advertising, I was working in his scrap yards up until I was 15. And so when I joined advertising, I was literally shit scared of opening my mouth, because the first job I got was a very small advertising agency, and my first boss said, "Look, you're never going to get anywhere talking like that." And he tried to give me elocution lessons in the lunch breaks.
Did he keep the receipt?
Yeah, I don't know if they stuck at all. But in the end, he sort of give up. He said, "Look, if you could just stop saying me, I know you can't say my, but if you just say ma, it's me." But it obviously didn't work, so I still say me.
Right, mate. Well, listen, Mark, can we just go one of those things about your object, because I'm intrigued here.
Oh yeah,
Weasel and Stout. You got a stuffed one, is that right?
That's right. So this is a recent delivery by Amazon. I bought myself a stuffed weasel and a stuffed stoat. Actually, not stout. Weasel and stoat. So anyone who knows a bit about Cockney rhyming slang means that means coat. And when I was at home, my mum, if she was cold, it was taters, and if she was hard up, she was brassic, and if I was misbehaving, she'd say "Urcha," generally followed by cow son. I don't know why. So I thought, I wish I recorded my mum when she was alive. I missed the way that she spoke, and I thought, because I do art now outside of my advertising job, I thought I'm going to put together. I'm creating an art show celebrating traditional London English, like I remember when I was a kid.
Yeah. So, and also the weasel bit was the old song, and it "Pop Goes the Weasel" as well.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that well. Anthony Newley, if I remember.
Yeah, and the weasel coat and Pop, I think, going to the pawnbrokers there. So listen, guys, so we'll get on the next bit. Let's come off the share now. Okay, so we had a good old introduction there from the panel and stuff. I just really want to address sort of next question, really, about this issue. I mean, it's been touched upon and reference about this question we're focused on: can you succeed in advertising, film, or PR with a Cockney accent? Kerry, you made a mention there about. I mean, do you want to tell some stories and experiences you've had there?
Well, I definitely think you can. I was told by the BBC once my Street English accent, and I think that was a polite way of putting it at the time, was never going to be good enough for the BBC, for myself to be a sports presenter at the time, even though I scored all the highest in every single round, including the screenings. So there you go, sort of quite alive and kicking. And I still do think that sort of stays with us today.
How did you feel when they said that to you? I mean, because you're scoring the top marks. I know you're bloody good, but so how did you feel when you had that sort of thrown back at you?
It's a bit perplexing. That was only a couple of years after coming out of university, and of course none of us should have gone to university, because some people thought we were scallywags to start with.
What happened there? I mean, what uni did you go to?
I went to the London College of Printing at Clerkenwell, so I didn't travel too far. Part of the London Institute. But that's where I collided with a lot of other regional accents. So obviously, you know, there's, you know, pros and cons in perceptions and bias wherever we go. So going back to the BBC, I don't think they'll be able to get away with saying that today, because things have moved on, you know, in the old inclusion, you know, equality and equity rules and so forth, social mobility, etc. And I hope that doesn't happen to anyone today.
But do you still think it's there?
I do still think it's there. You know, if you pronounce your T's and so forth, you might be perceived to have come from perhaps a bit of a better background, have better opportunities, but actually there's quite a few of us at the top of our games. We might have had to navigate it a bit differently, but I do think they're still there. Possibly not so much as in previous years, absolutely. You know, there's more awareness now of the inclusion agenda particularly. But yeah, I did run into somebody at the BBC a few years later and had a few words with them. So there's more stories like that and so forth. But, you know, to say you can't go on the BBC because you haven't got a regional accent, well, you can't get more of a regional accent than the one that I've got for London and the South East.
Oh, no,
If you're English and we're not trusted, then perhaps we'll blame the PR posters that put out some of that.
Yeah. Okay, Tom, can I ask you, mate? I mean, have you sort of encountered problems from sounding like you are coming from where you come from, mate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you've only got to take a cursory look at the sort of statistics that have come out in the last couple of years about the creative industries. One of them was 16%. Only 16% of people working in the creative industries are from working class backgrounds. So, you know, that's a big issue. And in fact, the creative industries will actually have to employ 250,000 more people just to be as socially diverse as the rest of the economy. So it's a big problem, and it is actually getting worse. So yeah, I mean, you only got to put 2 and 2 together. If you walk into a creative job with a regional accent, whether that's Cockney or whatever, you're not going to be taken as seriously as everybody else. And it's funny because I've done a few panel talks before, whether they're within agencies or at conferences or whatever. And I always get the same reaction. When people introduce people on the panel, it comes to me and I say hello the way that I would say hello to anybody normally. I'm like, all right, how you doing? And everyone starts laughing. And it's like, and it's kind of nice because it breaks the ice and it kind of, but they ain't laughing at anybody else saying hello. It's kind of, there's an expectation that somebody that's got a sort of a London accent is a bit of a geezer, a bit of a joker, which again is fine. Yeah. It makes connections and it's a bit more human. But if I'm then trying to talk about something serious, I know that I'm not really being taken as seriously as the other panelists just because I sound different, not because of my experience or my background or anything like that. So that's kind of, yeah, little things like that just happen to you all the time throughout your working life, that just reinforce this idea that maybe the creative industries or creative job is not really for you and you shouldn't really be here, you know. So you're having to battle with all of that while trying to do your best work because you know you've got to prove yourself all the time. So yeah, so that can be difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, have you had it like with job interviews, jobs you didn't get that you think, looking back, like Kerry was saying earlier about scoring top marks, yet somehow the job, I mean, have you had that sort of experience and stuff?
All the time. I mean, the majority of my background has been freelance, to be honest, because I've kind of found it easier to just go out and try and do things myself than to be accepted in a big company. And I think we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion in the creative industries, and I think that inclusion part either gets missed out or people just don't know what it means. I think it's one thing to hire people from underrepresented groups, but it's even more important to make sure that you can provide a workplace that allows those people to flourish and do their best work. And that's the thing that I've really struggled with, is the kind of workplace culture. It's just it's in advertising especially, it's just not set up for people who come from a different socioeconomic background or different culture. You've got different cultural references, you know, it's just very different. And that can often be an obstacle to you just getting on in life and career progression.
But what I mean, being devil's advocate here, one, someone say like, "Oh, you've just got a big chip on your shoulder, mate. Why don't you sort of adjust, you know, and change to suit them?" I mean, what would your response to that be?
Well, I think that the industry is really missing out. There's a huge untapped talent pool of people from working class backgrounds who are highly intelligent, creative, capable people that just don't get a look in. And actually, it's the industry that is missing out as much as it's the people. Because if you're not getting diverse voices, if you're not having a diverse workplace, you're really limiting what you can do creatively. And it's actually, I think the problem is that the industry needs to change. It's not that the people need to change and adapt.
Yeah. And I mean, Mark earlier told a fabulous story about, or a terrible story about, being asked to do elocution lessons. I mean, have you? Is it one of those things that's always sort of under the radar, like never mentioned, or have you ever had sort of explicit experiences like Mark's had there?
Well, I tell you what it is. It's more like, I think, because nowadays I think people are a lot more aware of not of saying the wrong thing and saying something that might be offensive to people. People are a lot more careful with what they say. But I think that what happens nowadays is you kind of get a lot more of the sort of people taking the piss out of your accent or kind of mocking you, which again, in a way, it can be a little bit of a nice kind of icebreaker thing. But it also, like I said earlier, if you're in a position or in a situation where you want to be serious and you want to be taken seriously, and people are sort of mocking your accent and where you come from, it's a little bit like, you ain't doing that to anyone else. Come on. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I mean, like, the only time I've really been angry when someone took the piss was, I mean, I don't mind, like as Kerry mentioned there, like you go like university and you meet people from different places, so I'll take the mickey out of Northerners and they'd take the mickey out of me and so on, and that seemed to be like even Stevens, fair enough. But one time I got really angry when there was a party, and this guy, because he was taking the piss from a posh, he was very up, posh, whatever, and mocking me, and that really got me. Whereas any other time, I'm up for a laugh, up for a bit of banter, and so on. Is that the difference, you think?
I think it definitely is. Yeah, I think it is, and I also think that it's just it's representative of a lack of awareness, which is just frustrating. I don't think that you would be. I don't think people would kind of mock the way anybody else speaks. It reminds you that there's a lack of awareness about this that is just frustrating.
Yeah. So Mark, I mean, you shared some stories going back perhaps a few years about like your first starting work and the guy giving elocution lessons, and I just wonder, on that story, did he actually give up, or what happened there, mate?
Well, it's funny because you mentioned it again. You referred to it just now, and it got me thinking for the first time. And I thought, what? Because he was wrong. My first boss, he was trying to do me a favour, but he was ultimately wrong. And I thought, why was he giving me that not very helpful advice? Well, like I say, I never really thought about it before. He was from Catford originally. So I don't know what he spoke like before, but he'd obviously been working on his own accent, and he'd learnt about fine wines and all. He won the Evening Standard prize for wine tasting. He started collecting art, and he knew about fine wines, and he had a slightly posh accent. So I thought, is this more about your insecurities than mine? And that's the first time I thought about it. And it just so happens I've got a job at a better agency a couple of years later, big flash American agency, Leo Burnett, and that was in the late 70s. And for the first couple of years, and I'll get invited into meetings and the like, the first couple of years, I didn't say a word. I was too frightened to open my mouth. So I perfected this really great technique, just put my hand on my chin and nodding sagely while everyone else talked.
We'll have that as a Cockney object, the sage nod.
Yeah, and I thought, I've got to say something. And you try and put on your posh telephone voice in a meeting, didn't work at all. Because I'd be self-conscious, I'd trip over my own tongue. And it's only when I got that actually I can be myself, I can talk like I talk, and let them deal with it.
What was the epiphany there? What was the epiphany, mate? What was the turning point?
It really was just the frustration. Well, I think I was trying to say something in a meeting because I always wanted to say my piece, but I was just a little bit frightened of showing myself up. And I was trying to put on my posh telephone voice, and I really did tie my tongue in knots. I forgot have I got to the end of the sentence yet? Where am I? what's going on? And everyone's looking at me. Oh, I tell you what, this was the big moment. This really was a big moment. When I was in a meeting, there's probably about 10 people there. You know, the thing about the new recruits that came in on the account group side, not the creatives, because you'd have a lot of Northerners. There was quite a lot of working class people in creative departments back then, but they were mainly Northerners. The mix was different. I've been inside an agency recently, and it's a little bit different, much more middle class than it was back in the 70s. But like I say, for whatever.
So going back to Tom's point about like diversity is getting worse in some ways.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm in this meeting. There's about 10 people in the room. The phone rings next to me, and it's right next to me. I'm the junior person in the meeting, and everyone turns around and looks. Like, pick up the phone, and I'm there, and the phone's ringing, and I'm there, and I'm not picking it up because I was too scared to talk on the phone in front of all these people. So the bloke, you know, the other junior, the posher one who come from university, he chucked his pen down, got up, walked the length of the table, and picked the phone up and answered it. And I thought, this don't work. I've got to do something about this. So I started talking in my own voice, and then I found it was an asset. It was the opposite to a hindrance. It was an asset because it gave me a point of difference. Yeah. And I got the mocking bit, because you're right, if a posh person had ever mocked my accent in a way of putting me down, then I might have got a bit aerated about that. But I don't know if anyone's aware of this. Quite a few years ago, when Lee Mack was a relatively young comedian, I remember seeing him on the telly, and he did this routine, which was all about being riddled with Cockney. I don't know if anyone saw that.
No, but tell us more, mate.
He'd do this arthritic impersonation of someone. I'm riddled with Cockney. I've got Cockney running all through me. I'm riddled with it. And I thought, you know, he's from Manchester or whatever. And I liked the fact that he was having a go at us Southern softies. Yeah. I thought that was good. And I would have felt kind of left out if he hadn't taken the piss out of the Cockney accent. He did it very, very well. Yeah. And it made me laugh a lot. I think that, to me, that's inclusivity, when you can all have a laugh together about our differences. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've kind of turned inclusive tribalism. That tribalism, you know, you don't go to a sports ground with everyone wearing the same scarf, but you know, as long as it's done sensibly. So you had this turning point, the phone call, and then thereafter, as you say, it was a sort of almost like your touch paper.
It was, you know, because again, I can get that if you don't play it right, you could not be taken seriously. But I think it can be disarming at the same time. So it's a good way of winning over an audience. You can see when we start talking like we talk, and like, apologies, because I know I'm a south of the river person, but when you talk like we talk, you see that people relax a bit. They don't, you know, in meetings that I go into now, they think, well, I'm dealing with a genuine person here, rather than someone doing it by the rule book. You know, it's
so that's what I mean. Authenticity coming through.
A conversation with someone who really doesn't mind revealing a bit of himself and not putting on an accent at all. So you can. It all depends how you use it. Because if you are jokey in a way that when it comes to the serious stuff, they don't take you seriously. So it's, you know, it's like having any weapon. Because it's great. I don't mean it as a weapon, but it's an asset. It really is an asset, having a genuine London accent, because they're getting rarer and rarer in London. So, and again, I miss getting into a black cab and being able to have a conversation with someone who talks like me. That's getting a rarer and rarer event. But that's only from a nostalgic point of view. I like the new London accent. I think it's great that English is continually evolving. It means that we've got a more vibrant language than almost any nation on earth. So the fact that London is changing, and there's a new. I've got a kids' school opposite me. None of them talk like me. Now they've got the new London accent. And I think it's great. And actually, that London accent is so trendy. They're using it all over adverts.
Yeah. And we would say that's Cockney.
The announcers having that accent. So it almost feels like the London accent now is trendy. It just happens to be the traditional one is getting rarer in London.
Yeah. That's about the point I think we'd be keen to emphasise is that's Cockney, but 2022, and so it's about accommodating, accepting, celebrating, rather than, as I say, and I love that phrase there, actually, weapons of Cockneydom. I think we might make a nice T-shirt that. But guys, just going back to sort of a question, and which seems to have emerged then, that yes, there's been prejudice, but also it's been an asset. In terms of like paradoxical, it's made us the people we are. Kerry, I mean, what ways do you think? As I say, you are because of like where you come from.
I think in a roundabout way, it makes you more resilient.
Yeah.
You might have to overcome some of these, hurdles, particularly in, sort of the younger years and so forth. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I do remember my dad saying to me, never forget your roots. So when I was down at the News International plant in Wapping, you could see from, basically the bathroom window, where my family used to grow up on, what's now perceived to be one of the worst council estates that there was. It was so bad. They raised it to the ground, and so forth. So I think, you are what you are. You should never change what you are. People should accept you for what you are. It's all about your ideas, what you bring to the table, collaboration, and so forth. But yeah, never forget your roots in a sense. And I think resilience is one of the things that comes out of it, which if you look back through the Cockney history, protests, riots, resilience, and so forth, but that's continuing on to today, but with also the support of many diverse communities that are now living in the communities that were considered, the stomping ground of the old Cockneys.
Yeah. And again, it's the story of Cockney is a good one there. Tom, what about you, mate? I mean, has it helped you in a way?
I think so, yeah. And I think that Mark made a great point just then about when you hear a Cockney accent, or any kind of, for me, any thick regional accent, you're dealing with a straight, genuine person. No nonsense. And I think that is that's definitely a strength and an asset. And I think as well, growing up in that kind of environment, you can, I mean, forgive my French, but you can spot bullshit at 500 paces. Do you know what I mean? And in the creative industries, you come across a lot of blaggers, and I think it gives you a sort of a real sixth sense of just being able to see through the nonsense and get to the point. And that's definitely a strength and an asset.
No one in the room's disagreeing with you there, mate. So, Mark, what about you, mate?
In what way? What do you mean?
Well, this adversity made you a stronger, more made you the distinct person you are today.
Yeah, look, maybe you never know, do you? I have found it. I did find it a big struggle early on. There's no doubt about it. But it just made me pedal harder, and I didn't think about it a lot. And I knew what I wanted, and I knew I was good. I mean, forgive me for being immodest, but I knew I was good, and I had to be able to express myself to be able to get that across. So, I think my biggest enemy throughout my whole career has no doubt been myself. Yeah. I'm the one who edited myself because I didn't think the way I was expressing things was good enough. So it's the same as my old boss who tried to give me elocution lessons. He obviously didn't think he was good enough, so he learned how to drink wine and talk better. It's very easy to point the finger somewhere else and blame society for putting you in a box, but no one puts you in a box like you do yourself.
Yeah.
And once I had the confidence to be myself, I had the freedom and the recognition that what I was and how I spoke was an asset. So I think like I say, I can't blame anyone else. It was me who's putting the brakes on. So that adversity, I had to battle with myself before I battled with anyone else, because no one has given me an hard time talking the way I do now.
Yeah.
Or coming from the background. I've been doing advertising for 45 years. It was a young person's business. It's against the odds. And, you know, I've got all the freedom I want now, and I've done pretty well. And that bastard back in the 70s who was holding me back was me.
Oh, thank God the phone rang, mate.
Hands on him, he's for it.
But thank God the phone rang at that meeting. Guys, can we open up to the floor? Saif, can you open up? I've got to apologise in that I've got to go off to Dublin virtually in a moment. I've stupidly got another room, but I'd love to keep the conversation going. And also, if I can mention Joanna in the room. Joanna, do you want to unmute, because you're doing a great project about Cockney accents and voices and stuff. Joanna's Dr. Joanna Gerwin, and she's working researching on Cockney accent. Can we give you a researcher plug and how you're looking for volunteers, Joanna? She's in the room. Oh.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. I can't switch my camera on. Sorry. Working properly here.
So tell us a little bit about your research work and stuff, and also any comments about what you've heard today.
Yes, so I'm going to put my link in the chat, as I've done in previous sessions. Hang on. I'm a social linguist working at Queen Mary University at the moment, and I have a research project, linguistic research project, about how Londoners think of different London dialects. So it's not about how people actually speak. That's also what linguists have looked into. But how Londoners think, experience, what they know about different London dialects, so about the meta discourse. And for this, I'm interviewing Londoners about their ideas, thoughts, experiences, attitudes about London dialect. And if you would like to participate, that would be fantastic. If you're a Londoner, if you grew up and lived most of your life in London, then I'd be happy to include you in my project, and then we could arrange an appointment for an interview. I come around with my recorder, and how it works is I would play a couple of audio clips first and ask you some questions about them, about the accent of the people that they hear, and then also ask you some questions about your own accent. Yes, so much as a teaser.
Great stuff. Well, keen to help you, Joanna.
Yes, hang on. I put the London just more to make sure that I spelled it correctly. I put the link. No. Yeah. Does that work? London Talk Research.
That's in there. I see London Talk Research. So,
yes.
And
so
in
you
terms
can
of
just follow the link, and
yeah. So, Joe, from our three guests today, I mean, is any new things you've learned about London accents from what they've said?
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting that it's still so stigmatized to speak with a local accent. I was really surprised by that. What Kerry told us here, what Tom said, what Mark said. It's just really, it's actually really surprising. I didn't think it was that stigmatized still to speak with a local accent. And I'd be really interested to follow on this conversation. If you are willing to be included in my project, that would be fantastic, actually. I was going to ask Andy for your email addresses anyway.
Okay, we'll do that.
If you can contact me via this link, that would be brilliant. Yeah, thanks very much.
Saif, can I head over to you, mate? Guys, massive thanks for being here. I'm ducking out, but please stay on. And we'll see you, and thank you so much, everyone there. Take care.
Thank you. Just someone's put their hand up, but it says iPhone. I'm not sure if they want to ask a question or share their experience. If they wanted to say anything, please unmute and say something. If they're not, that's not a problem. I just wanted to share a experience I had. I mean, I was born in Whitechapel, went to Rains Foundation. I don't know what's happened to that school now, but the and a lot of the students used to go. I mean, there weren't that many Bangladeshis there actually, because it's Church of England school, and everyone was probably wondering what that meant. And then, but the good part is the next grammar school, so everyone had lots of like aspiration for their kids and things like that. But one thing I noticed was I'd walked in with a slightly posh voice, and I hadn't noticed that, you know. So my dad used to go, you know, pronounce your S's and T's and things like that. So my friends Paul and John Burlow and all the rest of them used to kind of go, say that again. And I'd be like, what do you mean? Like, look. So it was kind of the other way around for a while for me before I readjusted again to my Cockney roots when I went to school in Essex in Camps Hill a bit more. So and picked it up a bit more. So nowadays when I went to university, I was told a number of times might want to drop the accent. At which point I just went, you might just want to, do something else and not say that. So, but I mean, the funny thing, I didn't really drop it. So I think the good part was people did exactly what Tom was saying, that sometimes I have to get people coming up and going, where are you from? Oh my God, I've never heard your accent before. So it's kind of exoticized even more, within these microcosms of what we think are bits of Cockney and culture and migrant communities, certainly for me anyway. So and my friends nowadays, I mean, my Bengali friends anyway, are all Cockney, and we're all kind of fighting for Brick Lane and things like that. So, it could keep the fight going, as they say, for Cockney. So I'm just going to open it up to everyone else. I mean, has anyone in the audience experienced, any of the visitors experienced that kind of accent prejudice, or maybe they've had an unusual experience like myself, or Truce did mention something. She said that she was on Truce Janssen, who said she was on 888 and had to learn a lot of English through that. Is that right, Truce, or abbreviation?
Yeah. When I came to London 25 years ago, I could only watch EastEnders using the subtitles, which was God gift to me, and I was very proud of myself when I actually could leave out the 888. It felt like now I'm a Londoner, So yeah, no, it was for me it was really a different language to the English that I came with to London.
And was it that different from London? Like what you saw as what standard London English or something like that, or Estuary English, or the Cockney?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
The Cockney that you heard, or the accent that you heard, how different was it? Was it totally different, or 70% different, or
totally different? So I'm from the Netherlands. You do not get anything coming over in the Cockney language, and we just don't watch EastEnders there. That was not the case yet, I think. And also, I know that he might have messed it up completely, but films or filmmakers like Hollywood types kind of stuff, Guy Ritchie, hadn't broken through yet. It wasn't yet, seen as okay. This is something to export as well, because that has happened in the media. It's been exported to a great extent. So yeah, no, for me it was a completely different language. Never heard it before at all. So abroad it's really, the standard English or United States English that we get taught. Yeah.
Okay, so Joanna, did you want to say something, or was that the old hand up? So
sorry, now. Yes, I did want to say something, and I wanted to share with you another link, which is about a large research project which was conducted at Queen Mary University some years back, called Accent Bias Britain, and it's really about how it's a resource also for employers, for teachers. How can we spot different accents? How can we uncover our own bias towards different accents? And the Cockney accent is just one that was included in that study, but it might be interesting just to see that there have been actions to counter this accent bias that is still around in society.
That's fascinating, and I'm going to have to have a proper read through that. And also, for any of the speakers, I mean, did anything come up for you in just as we're talking? Do you think things are changing with it? I mean, I know there seems to be a homogenization on all fronts of what is London, what is England, the big branding of certain areas. Is Cockney considered in that mix? Maybe we'll start with Tom.
Well, I think what I notice, I guess, from my point of view, is that there are a lot of conversations have been happening in the last few years, quite rightly, about diversity in the workplace. But it always seems that class, socioeconomic background is bottom of that list, if it even ever gets mentioned at all. And because of the work I've been doing with common people, I've really sort of been getting my head into lots of reports and just speaking to a lot of people. And it really seems that there is a big gap, because I think it's a difficult one to address, because, I mean, when you talk about Cockney, do you mean people from the East End? Do you mean people from London? It could mean people from Brentwood, to be honest, because I think if I went to Romford or Brentwood, you'd be more likely to see people eating pie and mash and wearing a baker boy cap than you would in Bow. Do you know what I mean? So it's a difficult one to define. I just hope that in the next few years, these very relevant and timely conversations about diversity come to include like London working class accents and people and that thing and that kind of thing as well.
Good point. I think also I was speaking to someone recently, and they said, "Oh, but the whites have come back," and I said it's so funny because being non-white, I guess, is you always knew the whites as the working class whites or the Cockneys, really. So they haven't really come back. So it's a very different thing happening in the East End at the moment. So pass that question over to Kerry as well. Is Kerry still there? Just in terms of
one of the things that's come to my mind, and you know, myself having worked on the UK government Great campaign, you know, London is great, film is great, you know, come here for travel and so forth. So that wasn't a consideration. You know, not much to my disdain and so forth. But where are we actually heading? Because you know, we're in the era of, you know, automation, data, technology, voice assistants. Voice assistants have been heavily criticised. You know, automation.
Good point. Yeah.
Might even go and order your food in, you know, McDonald's takeaway or whatever going forwards, and they can't understand what's perceived to be the synthetic regional accents. So where are we actually heading with this, in a sense? I think that's, you know, sort of bit of my concern for going forwards.
Yeah, so the digital area, I mean, again, do you think that play? Because I emailed a lot of the so-called councillors in across Essex as well, but all the emails bounced back, and I wonder if there was a bit of a block with the word Cockney because it has another word within it, which might be seen as rude, and actually all the emails bounced back, so I hadn't emailed them back. So does I mean, for Mark, does what is the impact of the digital world in terms of Cockney? Oh, can't hear you. Might have to put if you unmute.
Oh, yeah, I've done that. Sorry, I actually lost my.
Oh, I can't hear you. I think it's just breaking up a little bit. I think we'll just give it a few seconds. I think Mark might come back. So, yeah, the digital world is. Oh, here we go. Mark's back.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, my day job is shooting TV commercials, so I'm a very traditional advertising person. From a digital point of view, now I know a lot of advertising money is spent online now, but I don't really get involved in that. As far as the impact of Cockney-wise, like I was talking about earlier, the new London accent that is taking over from the traditional Cockney accent that came from the East End is actually quite trendy. And, you know, you listen to the radio and it'll be on every radio ad break, and you'll hear announcers on the telly in between the programmes with the new London accent. I think there's a new kind of revival and acceptance as London being for want of a better term, a trendy place to be associated with. So, you know, I'm feeling quite optimistic about what happens next. You know, from a personal point of view, while I'm doing my art show, is that I think what used to be accepted as the Cockney accent has moved out to Essex and Kent now, is like a precious jewel that has to be recorded somehow. But over time, that with progress, the new London accent is going to be the whole London accent, I imagine. So I see nothing but optimism. I don't see a lot of prejudice in my circles. And, I get inside advertising agencies a lot. I think the main problem with advertising generally, whether it's digital or traditional, is that it's not very creative anymore. And I think, and again, I've got my own biases about that, because it used to be creative. There used to be a lot more interested in advertising as a creative place to go. And I imagine that as me as a young kid who never thought he could get into advertising but laughed at the adverts, would have wanted a job in it. I should imagine there's a lot of working class kids who really don't want anything to do with advertising and the media outside of what's happening on Netflix and the night, because TV's never been so good. Who wants to do anything to do with advertising? You look at the posters, they ain't very good. You look at the TV commercials, they ain't very good. I should imagine there's some pretty sharp working class kids who really don't want to do it because it's not very cool. That's why you got the middle class kids going into advertising.
Yeah, I went to a theatre show recently during lockdown, actually, and it was all about the Irish sort of troubles, and all the accents were, I would say, pretty middle class actors and everything. So I couldn't understand half of it because I didn't think that the characters had been properly fulfilled, so I left disappointed. So but what about these theatres and so? Like, I used to go, one of my first shows was the Theatre Royal in Stratford, which has obviously got a big and really important sort of stakeholdership in this area. Do you think things like theatres and institutions are opening up in some ways? Because I'm seeing more black plays kind of go to the and East End plays go into central London, or actually I'm not, that's like, but at some point they were,
Yeah, we never used to talk about diversity in the olden days. Of course we didn't. And, when I was at school, my very best mate was Somnath Bhatt. I imagine he came from India. My other best mate was David Aola. I think his dad was African. We never talked about it. We just had a laugh. Now, obviously, the debate is very open, and which is a bloody good thing. Certainly, because I'm just looking at the little pictures. I think I've been on the planet longer than everyone else. I can just see progress. I can see progress all around me, apart from advertising, which is just crap now from a creative point of view. But I don't think there's anything to worry about. Things are getting better and better. My missus is actually a playwright, and she's put a couple of plays on. I think the most prejudice I get now is nothing to do with my ancient accent. It's to do with the fact that I'm old. So being 65, I've got to.
There's a song for that.
I've got to come up with clever strategies to fool people that I'm younger. So I'm trying to act more immature as I get older.
When I'm 64 comes to mind.
Yeah, but I think as far as London goes, I think there's never been a more. We're coming out of COVID, so everything feels optimistic to me. I know there's wars going on outside of these shores, but optimistically, I think London. I'd love to think of it's going to go through another swinging 60s where we're the centre of the world from a cultural point of view. And I think there's no reason why that can't continue. I think, from what I see on the screens, everything's more inclusive than it's ever been before. And I think it's just going to get better and better and better.
Well, that's a great one too. I mean, any last points? I think there's some really positive points there and outcomes that could possibly be reached. Any last points for any of the speakers or anyone who's coming?
I think just one positive, just going back to the question about the digital age, I think one really nice thing is that we can now do stuff like this because everybody's online, everybody's on Zoom. It means you can find like-minded people really easily. And I think that we can take that for granted, because 20 years ago when I was kind of a teenager and growing up and thinking about what I wanted to do, I didn't know anyone that worked in any creative industry or any job. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't have anyone to kind of ask questions. Whereas now you've got people like ourselves at the touch of a button, and people are more aware of things. So I think it makes the whole process maybe a little bit less daunting for younger people coming into it now. And I think that's a definite positive from the digital age.
Very good point. I think also next week we've got a conversation about Cockney Bengali rhyming slang. Well, that's what it's called. It's actually looking at the revival of Bengali, a particular accent called Sylheti, and how we can probably learn from that, because there's a bit of a revival with the new generation. You know, they're doing their own fonts, they're doing their own videos, they're doing their own mini campaigns. So we're wondering if we could do some with the Cockney ones as well. That'd be really good to do. Mark, is that your hand up?
Yeah, can I make a final point? I don't know.
Go
I
for
don't
it.
know if anyone else has got this problem. People keep asking me if I'm Australian.
Ah, right. Apparently,
Yeah.
Andy says that. He says a lot of Cockneys moved to Australia, so there's these pockets of Cockney which are going to have its own traction, which we're going to have to trace at some point. Back to the
I think
East
that's
End.
more than the twang, and apparently we all come from London town as well. But just a point for me, just sort of bringing that all together, you know, picking up on what you've said, Mark, you know, about sort of, you know, the multicultural London English that we're now seeing. I do see it as a new form of speech, but with a significant Cockney influence. And God forbid, you know, they take the cheerful, talkativeness out of that, in a sense, because that's what we're really known for.
Yeah. Yeah, the humour one's coming up in 2 weeks' time. We're going to have a good chat about is there such a thing as Cockney humour? So looking forward to that as well. So we're just past 1 o'clock. Well, 6 minutes past 1, and what we'll do is just for today, I'll have to put it to a close. Obviously, I can continue forever, and I'm just going to have to go down to Brick Lane and sell some Save Brick Lane t-shirts. So if anybody wants to buy their limited edition run. But thank you very much for everyone who spoke, to Tom, Kerry, Mark, and for everybody who joined us today. And we'll let you know about the next stages and when any parts of the recording are online. And see you at the next one, hopefully.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of the day, everyone.
Take care.